Hello and welcome to another brand new episode of What the FinTech, the podcast from the team behind FinTech Futures and the Banking Technology magazine. My name is Paul Hindle, Managing Editor of FinTech Futures, and for this episode we're joined by Bill Borden, Corporate Vice President of Financial Services at Microsoft. Bill, welcome to the show.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me, Paul.
It's great to have you here as well. Just to get started, would you like to quickly let us know a bit more about yourself and your role at Microsoft then?
Sure. I lead Microsoft's financial services industry group globally. So my team, like myself, is made up of folks who worked in the industry across banking, capital markets, and insurance. And our role for the company is to represent the voice of financial services, which we define as banking, capital markets, and insurance, to the company to ensure that we're building the right products and services and capabilities to serve their businesses, obviously in a highly regulated industry.
Excellent. Sounds great. And again, great to have you here. And thanks so much for taking the time out to speak with us today. So on the show this week, we'll be exploring how Agentic AI is being developed and deployed in financial services and the impact it's having on innovation, security, and governance in the sector. We'll discuss the current state of play with Agentic AI, the trends shaping its development, and the challenges of deploying it responsibly in such a highly regulated sector. We'll also dive into Microsoft's recent Cyber Pulse report, which highlights risks like shadow AI and the importance of governance, observability, and zero trust principles. And also take a look at how financial services are leading the way in implementing these safeguards, the lessons other industries can learn, and how collaboration with regulators and technology providers is driving progress. We'll also look at real-world applications of AI agents in areas such as fraud detection, customer service, and operations, as well as how financial services are balancing innovation with security, before finishing with a look at what's next for AI agents in financial services and how organizations can prepare for the future. So to start off with then, Bill, let's set the scene, I guess. What's the current state of play with Agentic AI in financial services at the moment? How far along are we with development and deployment, and what trends are you seeing from the wider industry in terms of focus areas?
Yeah, the trends have moved rapidly when you think about generative AI being really publicly announced to be used more broadly with ChatGPT and OpenAI back in 2023, 2024. So if you think about where the industry has gone from just understanding generative AI to actually this concept of agents that really became to scale capabilities really around January 2024 to where we are today, the deployment and use of the technology is fascinating. Now, financial services is super interesting because it's obviously a highly regulated environment. So you might think that financial services institutions may be a bit slower on the uptake, but it's really the data that we're seeing, it's really been the opposite. So studies that we've done through our partnerships with IDC and our studies that we're going to talk about, our Cyber Pulse, are actually showing that financial services is actually leading the way with regards to industries that are actually deploying AI at scale. So the interesting thing about that is financial services institutions have always been big users of AI, right? Fundamentally using AI to support machine learning and model management, particularly around risk and fraud. And with generative AI, the idea of now extending that into natural language processing to actually think about tools that can be used around the organization has been an accelerant for the industry to move forward with now moving into agents. And so what we're finding is probably from the data we're seeing is about 11% of the agents that have been deployed globally around the world are actually in the financial services industry. And that's an encouraging thing from the standpoint of a highly regulated industry being able to implement agents in a observable, secure, compliant manner, building off of the traditional governance, security, control, compliance frameworks that they've had in place to move forward with agent building. And the other thing that the industry has been proving out is this notion of actually moving to scale. And we're seeing patterns around industries, not just financial services, but other industries that have been moving with the deployment of generative AI and agents at a faster pace. And so we've been studying those industries and looking at how are those industries been on the frontier firm side of operating with agents. And we're actually seeing from the data that they're actually seeing a 3x return on their investment versus some of the laggards. And so we've been studying what those frontier firm patterns are looking like around how they're deploying agents. And financial services is, again, leading in many industries that we've investigated around this as an industry moving forward.
And you mentioned that Cyber Pulse report there as well, which looked at how AI agents are reshaping the security landscape and their deployment in financial services. Can you tell us a bit more about that report and the security standards that are required for AI agents, especially in highly regulated industries like financial services?
Yeah, the idea of building agents with particularly low code, no code tools has really taken off. And from the standpoint of organizations wanting to actually get immersed in AI, and so getting their users and their businesses actually to learn about AI and their capabilities, the idea of using low code tools to actually build agents has proliferated pretty advanced in ways over the last couple of years. So institutions are dealing with this idea of agent sprawl. And what we're finding from our Cyber Pulse study is that 29% of security professionals that we spoke to as part of the report stated that they see employees are using generative AI agents across the organization. Many of them are not authorized by their organization. So this idea of having observability around the agents that are being built in your organization and having the control framework around that is really paramount and front and center around what this means. And so this idea of stepping back and then financial services institutions leveraging the disciplines that they already have in place around governance and compliance and security is now being applied to how they actually think about managing the idea of observability and being able to have a view of agents that are in their organizations, apply the governance policies that they have across the institution functionally, as well as how they apply governance to employees around access, privilege, identification management, verification, monitoring of policy alignment. Those things are all being put in place now across their strategies with managing AI agents. And then the third element of that, beyond observability and governance, is this notion of zero trust. So that still applies to how financial institutions are managing humans, in that never assume trust, always verify. So as agents are created and built into the organization, the idea of those agents having verifiable identities and explicit permissions and guardrails around what they can access and data that they can control, those policies and procedures are extended to agents as well. So you're starting to see enterprises being able to put that framework in place to extend what they do today in the physical world with humans to actually apply that to AI and agents.
So how are financial institutions leading the way in implementing these standards then?
It's really interesting. The proliferation is pretty dramatic. We've been using some of our telemetry tools going back to November 25, and we're seeing that financial services as a sector is representing about 11% of all agents that are deployed around the world. So as an industry, it's moving at scale fairly quickly around the idea of AI and agents. And so again, financial services companies are extending and adopting their capabilities, being obviously operating in highly regulated environments, to actually extend their policies and procedures around governance and security and compliance, around their control structures in terms of first line, second line controls, in terms of their audit procedures. They're extending those operational procedures into how they're looking at their enterprise structure for managing AI and agents. And so extending those principles has allowed them to move forward at pace, but do that in a controlled and secure and properly governed environment.
Excellent. And how are these safeguards influencing best practices in other industries, would you say, and what lessons can be learned from the financial services model?
Well, again, I think the idea of consistency, thinking about governance and compliance in terms of how you run your business, obviously from a reporting and regulatory compliance perspective, financial services institutions have the history of procedures and structures and policies in place to actually apply to governing AI. So other industries are looking at those practices, right? Around, hey, how do we think about that governance control framework in a non-regulated way, but we can still apply in our organization? And then, of course, the idea of how do you now not slow down the pace, but still be able to actually move forward within your control structures is the key. So I think financial institutions are really highlighting the fact that trust and speed don't necessarily have to be trade-offs with regards to thinking about AI at scale. Trust and speed just need to be coordinated as part of your AI policy rollout and advancements.
Right. And what role does collaboration between financial institutions, regulators, technology providers play in establishing these standards then?
Oh, huge. And this isn't new just with AI. I mean, financial institutions, technology partners, and regulators have always been working together over the years around the rollout and use of technology. So Microsoft has always viewed as not just building technology, but how you actually use technology in a responsible way, building off of those principles, moving into PC computing to cloud computing and to now AI, It's just an extension of that culture and set of capabilities. And so the financial institutions obviously building their governance, compliance, risk modeling procedures and capabilities in concert with the regulators providing expectations, right, for trust and accountability is great. And then the technology providers like Microsoft help translate those discussions around controls and compliance into how we need to build capabilities into our products and services. And so it's been an ongoing discussion where there's education around what the technology can do to the regulators so that they can then think through, okay, what does that mean around how we think about setting expectations for accountability and trust and experience around how these tools should be used. They give guidance to the financial institutions. They then tune those to even further definitions for how they want to run their business. And then we have continuing conversations. And Microsoft has been a leader in this space as well. We actually have regional and global regulatory summits where we speak with the global regulators around the world. We speak with them with our customers to actually encourage this cross collaboration.
Excellent. And I guess with how quickly the technology is evolving then, how do these governance frameworks ensure that AI agents remain safe and trustworthy as the tech becomes more advanced? What do you see as the next big challenge for financial institutions in maintaining security and governance with these?
Yeah, it's really a question. I think since the idea of large language models being available at scale and the democratization of this technology being available and the compute being available now, and obviously we know the demands around building the capacity for compute, that's going to continue. So more and more, there's technology to allow models to advance faster at a faster pace. There's compute coming along to actually take on the additional demand, and that cycle is going to continue. What's been clear, though, is this enterprise structure that I think has been pretty coming into focus over the last year, in particular around from an enterprise structure, how are you going to actually manage models in a way that you can bring them into your environment and have access to them? So the models are going to continue to get better and change. And what's your structure to be able to bring in those models in your enterprise control structure and then apply those models to your applications and your agent strategies? So that's one set of capabilities. Data is another area, right? Obviously, the key to the contextual information and the data that uses the models in your environment is how do you manage your data environment? And so tools around being able to reason over your data, have a one lake view over your data so that you can then reason on top of that, no matter where your data sits, but have a one lake view around that so that you can analyze that. That's another layer that's actually becoming pretty clear. And then another layer is consistency on the interface to your users across your organization, front, middle, and back office. And so how do you have a consistent interface that can allow you to build AI into it so that you can create an environment for a researcher that's different for a trader, that's different for a finance or an HR person? The interface is the same, but you can build agents and you can build applications into that interface, into that natural language interface. So that idea of that interface, the data, the model management, those are building blocks that are in place. And then now you're getting into the agent structure. And so as agents are built, either low-code agents or agents built by your developer environment, how do you now have a control plane view around all of those agents in your environment? And so for Microsoft, we've been building out those platform capabilities to give structure to that. And then institutions can decide how they want to build into that or how they want to have other third parties build into that. So on the desktop, we have Copilot. On the ability to build low-code agents, we have Copilot Studio. We have Microsoft Fabric to give you a one-lake view over all of your information, no matter where it sits. It could be in our cloud, it could be in another cloud, it could be in a database, but you have a one-lake view. We have Microsoft Foundry, which allows you to have model management in the enterprise structure, so you can always have the latest models. And again, that allows you to build a strategy to now look at agent building. And now we're recently coming out with a capability called Agent 365 to give you a 360-degree view of all the agents in your environment. So you have observability and you can actually enforce your compliance and control structures. So those building blocks, we have been spending a lot of time getting that enterprise structure in place so that institutions can decide how they want to build against that. And that's super exciting, but it really gets into addressing now the idea of how do we move at pace and have intelligence and trust as the basis for your enterprise structure for how you want to roll out AI.
Excellent. And I guess building on that then, I mean, how do financial institutions balance that need for innovation with the imperative to maintain robust security and governance frameworks?
And again, the industry has a heritage of doing this, right? As new technologies have come out, whether it's cloud computing, whether it's mobile, or whether it's the internet, the institutions have always had to look at new technologies and then understand how to actually leverage them within their governance and control frameworks. And then, of course, how they actually manage that in terms of being compliant with the regulators where they're doing business in the countries that they're in. So building on those foundations, I think that's allowing the financial services industry to actually move forward by adapting those policies and procedures to move at pace and scale. As I said earlier, it's not a trade-off between speed and security and trust. It's how you now continue to bring those together so that you can do both of those at scale at the same time. And I think the financial services industry has a leg up because of working in a highly regulated environment to bring those principles forward around observance, around governance, and applying frameworks to allow you to have continuous observability, to use tools like I just described around an enterprise structure to do that. And we're constantly evolving our tool sets to do that, and then applying the zero trust principles. And these agents, as they become in the organization, they should be, from our perspective, part of your workforce strategy. Because our view around AI is it's enabling the ability to extend human ingenuity and human creativity to a different level. So we don't view this as agents on their own. We view this as agents and humans working together. And so as you onboard a new employee into your organization, you give them an ID, you give them permissions, you give them access to what applications they can control and what data they have accessibility to. And you can continually observe how they are behaving. You do the same thing with your agents. You give them an ID, you give them controls and guardrails. You have continuous observability capabilities so that you can see how the agents are performing, and then you can adjust from there. And we're building the tool sets and the capabilities in partnership with the regulators and our key customers to actually define these capabilities. So it's moving fast, and we're seeing through our cyber pulse that the leaders aren't slowing adoption down. They are actually figuring out their principles and how to extend them at a faster pace. And we're seeing that in financial services.
The clock is ticking for the Banking Tech Awards 2026 early bird deadline. Submit your nomination by the 5th of June and save £50 on your entry fee. This is your chance to showcase your groundbreaking achievements and gain global recognition in the world of FinTech, RegTech, PayTech, and more. Don't miss out on this exclusive opportunity to save and shine. Head to the Banking Tech Awards website now and start your nomination today. Remember, the early bird catches the worm and saves £50.
I mentioned at the top of the show, AI agents are already being used in areas like fraud detection, onboarding, operations, customer service. Can you share some specific examples of how these agents are delivering value in FS?
Yeah, as at the core of competing, what we're seeing in terms of, I mentioned the idea of there are firms at the frontier that seem to be operating and getting to scale at a faster pace, and they're seeing 2 to 3x returns greater than the laggards. And so when we do a deeper study into that, we are seeing patterns around how use of AI and agents are really falling into 4 buckets. One, how do you think about empowering employees across your organization by giving them different ways to work and giving them faster access to information to get them to insights and decision-making, and allow them to think about how they break down the silos for how they engage across the organization and also engage with customers. Second bucket is just reimagining and rethinking how you can interface and engage with your customers, either directly or indirectly through all of your channels. So the ability to rethink what engagement with your customers look like and how you actually adapt to the expectations that customers have of you, whether they're individuals or institutions, because they're using these agentic AI tools as well. And so their expectation is how are you applying that to servicing them and their needs? The third area is the opportunity to actually not just apply AI to existing business processes and workflows, but to actually use AI and the abilities of generative AI to rethink workflow and reimagine what workflows could be across your business. And in financial services, institutions are traditionally very, very, very siloed across front, middle, and back office. That leads to a lot of handoffs and changes. Can you change and break down those barriers by rethinking workflow and letting agentic AI allow you to do that? And then the fourth pattern we're seeing is just, hey, how do I bend the curve on innovation? Because the reality of it is you've got to get more out of your investment in terms of return on what you invest in technology and what you invest in people. And so how do I get products and services out the door faster? Traditionally, it would take months or years to get new products and new features into the deployed across all of your financial services capabilities. Now you've got to break that down find ways to actually get new products and services out within weeks and months, but still do that in a way where you're doing it in a secure and compliant manner. And so you're seeing patterns in those four areas. And so you're seeing companies like BlackRock transforming its investment lifecycle using Microsoft AI integrated services into their Aladdin platform that services client relationship managers and portfolio managers. So now you have client relationship managers that can generalize personalized briefs and very specific analysis to their customers to bring unique insights at a much faster pace. So you're seeing portfolio managers having access to real-time analytics and research summaries through their Aladdin Copilot that they've created to actually drive decision-making much faster to actually take advantage of market dynamics. You're seeing banks like Banco Bradesco, who they're building a Bradesco intelligent agent that focuses on digital customer resolution across their 74 million customers. So 100% of interactions that come in are first handled by their Bradesco intelligent agent, and they're achieving 83% resolution of those customer inquiries out of the gate. And so you can imagine what that's doing to customer satisfaction, but also in terms of cost reduction. And then institutions like in insurance, Generali France, right? They're a key player in the insurance sector in France. They built help desk operations functions that are supported by AI to actually look at how decisions are made. And they're 30% of the requests coming in through their call centers are now being handled by AI to directly resolve customer issues with no human intervention. So again, the idea of better quality of serving their customers, higher customer satisfaction, and again, cost takeout. So you're starting to see these things roll out at scale across banking, capital markets, and insurance, and seeing it happen globally.
The Cyber Pulse report suggests that responsible AI adoption is becoming a competitive advantage. You've touched on a few points already that I've been discussing, but why do you think financial institutions are uniquely positioned to lead in this area?
I think the maturity of their governance frameworks around managing in a regulated environment, highly structured environment, and also a highly attacked environment from a cyber perspective, they have frameworks in place, they have organizational structures in place to extend capabilities around this technology that they've obviously been applying to bringing in technologies in the past. And so there's a bit of the culture and control environment that's in place to do that at scale. And now they're thinking about restructuring that in a way and extending that in a way so they can still get through those processes at a much quicker pace. Because the idea of now being able to create AI-infused applications as well as to create agents is now becoming fairly straightforward with the power of the tools and the power of the compute. So the challenge now is if I can build an agent within hours or using low-code tools within an hour, the question is, how do I actually deploy my governance framework against those agents so that I can then move them in a controlled environment or move them to a broad scale environment? So that's what institutions are actually now trying to work through now around, if I can get a model built that can bring tremendous value to structurally how we operate or value to how a product operates for a customer in the market, if I can do that within hours or day, how do I get that through my control framework structure without taking days, weeks, months to actually go through that process? And so that's where institutions are really trying to operate and think about how they apply their policies and controls in a way that also brings scale. And so I think they're going to, I think as an industry, and I think more broadly for all industries, we're going to get a lot of learnings out of financial services institutions who can actually understand how to scale trust as well as speed and capabilities at a faster pace. And that comes down to functional structuring, how institutions are organized to do the decision-making, and actually applying AI to the process as well around how they're doing their decision-making as well.
Excellent. I guess if we start looking towards the future, then what steps can organizations take today to prepare for the future of agentic AI adoption?
I think, as I was saying before, a lot of learnings over the last 2 years around the idea of generative AI and what it means to actually test and learn around what does a natural language prompt look and feel like? What does it feel like to actually leverage a large language model that I bring into my enterprise environment that I can actually start to use? What does it feel like to build an agent that we've built on our own or to use a third-party agent in our enterprise structure? So there's been a lot of point learnings very rapidly around how to get to scale around using the capabilities. There's also been a lot of learnings around, okay, so how do we apply that to our security, compliance, risk, and control governance frameworks as well? So a lot of learnings by the institutions. Now the question is, how do I actually bring an enterprise strategy around this at a platform perspective at different layers to actually think about scale? Because what's been clear is that betting on one model or betting on a type of silicon is probably not the structure that you want to build in terms of enterprise strategy, because the models in the silicon underneath that are going to change, right? We're going to see a model, right? It was OpenAI was getting all the attention. Now it's been Claude, but I'm pretty sure there's going to be other models that are going to leapfrog. So how do you build an environment where you can have availability and bring those models in when they're ready into your environment so they can be controlled in a way that you want to apply them to your applications or your agent building structure? So having that platform view around how you want to do that's pretty clear. Continuing to enhance your view around how you manage your data and what tools you want to reason over your data, so that as your data structures change, you still have a common approach to how you can reason over that data with lineage so that you can apply your AI. That's clearly a strategy that institutions are looking at how they build that and build opportunities so you don't get locked into something necessarily, but you have an approach to having a platform view that you can build underneath. And then in the user interface, which is really important around your workflow and how you want to build in a consistent way, the interfaces by persona across your functional areas for people to have a canvas to build unique things around how AI and agents are used, again, in a canvas that as agent building and tools change or models changes, you still have a consistent user interface that leverages the ability around workflow around your organization in a consistent way. And now this notion of how do I manage agents? So what's my control plane around managing agents in my enterprise structure? So that leads to an enterprise structure that gives flexibility for how things change underneath. So how do I invest in build versus buy around that? And then the principles around visibility, right, into the agents that you're building and the structures that you have, how that aligns to your security and governance process, policies, and procedures, how you treat agents like part of your workforce. As I mentioned earlier, bringing them on, giving them consistency around verifiable IDs and principles and controls around what they can access, and then observability around them. And then the whole principle built on the zero trust by default. Again, never assuming trust, but always verifying. So every action is logged and everything is verifiable around how the institutions around agents work. Those are you can see it coalescing into that kind of enterprise approach and structure model around how institutions are starting to actually lay this out.
Excellent. I guess to finish off here then today, I mean, how do you envision the role of AI agents expanding in financial services over the next 5 years, do you think?
I think it's really interesting. You're seeing lots of debates, right, from heads of organizations saying, hey, AI is really going to replace a whole bunch of human beings. And we're more of the mindset at Microsoft that AI is going to enhance human workflow. And so the idea of organizational structures not being hierarchical necessarily with regards to how they exist today, but breaking down how you're going to operate as a business by what outcomes you want to create and generate. So you might be organizing humans along with agents in different ways to actually get work components created in different ways to create the efficiencies I was talking about around re-engineering the way that you work. But we do feel that it's always going to be built on a strategy around human oversight and human intelligence and intuitive thinking as part of the process. And so we think there'll be new roles created around that for individuals around how they manage agents or how they build agents or what that looks like. So productivity will be a focus, but I think the unlock around how you rethink doing business or how you rethink how your products and services are built or modified to actually serve customers differently. And also the ability to, at the core, get at information so that you can get at deeper insights and decision-making. Because ultimately, this is about a deeper level of intelligence that you have in your organization that can be applied to large language models. And then how do you institute and infuse that intelligence in a trusted and secure way across your workflow so that you can rethink how you change your environment. And so one of the big pieces that I think is going to be a real focus in that enterprise structure that I was talking about is as agents become part of your workforce, what is your control plane around having an enterprise view around managing agents? So we're very, very, very excited about the general availability of our Agent 365 tool as we've rolled it out within Microsoft and started to get a control plane view of agents across Microsoft. It's been fascinating to see the pace and scale of how they're being used, but more importantly, confirming our control structures around how agents are being used. And so institutions need to think about that as well. And then in that control structure, how might they build on top of that, or how might they have something to now build on to extend if they want to extend further security or compliance regulations that they think are important. But we think that governance of agents to deal with that agent sprawl and that not having visibility of agents being risk in your organization is something that's really going to be coming into focus over the next 6 months.
Thanks again, Bill, for chatting with us today. To close out the podcast, we have on our infamous FinTech jails. This is where we ask for an industry term, buzzword, or trend that you've seen or heard enough of. Or, of course, you can advocate to free one of the previously incarcerated terms. So what would your selection be for this week?
Interesting. Wondering if I wanted to free something or add, but I did pick the opportunity to add, Paul. So for mine, I'm going to go with the word frictionless to add to the jail. And I did notice you have seamless, which is already in jail. So I view frictionless as kind of being similar to seamless in a way that it's somewhat, what does frictionless mean? It's not, doesn't give you any definition around what it means. There's no metrics around what frictionless means. There's nothing to understand specific benefits, but you hear that a lot. Ooh, this is going to reduce friction or make this frictionless. So it's a good kind of soundbite word, but the meaning of it, I think, is pretty relaxed. And so now when you put it into the context of what we've been discussing today, AI needs to become embedded in core financial workflows to really get value out of it. And so the industry is moving into this idea of frictionless decision-making, but doing that in a way where it's still trusted and governed with intelligence. And so we're not trying to use friction to say that we want fewer controls. What we're trying to say is that as you infuse AI through workflow, the idea of controls are built directly into that workflow to actually drive insights in a trusted way. And so if we talk about frictionless, you got to take it down to a level around what are you really trying to address with it. And we think at Microsoft, the opportunity is embedding this idea of trusted intelligence directly into the flow of work to get at insights faster so that institutions and people can move faster while at the same time incorporating governance, security, and human oversight. That's the real opportunity that really kind of takes this notion of frictionless to really actually drive what value it could mean in context.
Excellent. Yeah, and I guess given what we've been discussing today as well with how much of a highly regulated industry financial services is, can any process ever truly be frictionless, do you think, in financial services?
Yes. There are examples of that today. I mentioned one of them with regards to Generali and their call center, but you're seeing in the call center space, in particular, the idea of inquiries coming in and actually moving well beyond the kind of, I'll say, dumb chatbots that we used to have, right? Where it was just deterministic, and if you asked the right question, you could get something. Now, actually having something that greets you more human-like in terms of how it talks to you or how it's represented to you, understands the question that you ask in context and in sentiment around who you are, then to address your problem or issue and do that without any humans involved to actually address your problems and issue. You're seeing that more and more real time. So I think the extension of AI in financial services, a lot of it is going to be internal productivity gains around what occurs just because of the nature of being regulated. And the idea of what then touches customers is going to be really scrutinized from a regulatory point of view. But we are seeing that customer interaction being done in the call center space with really sound results. Customers being happy about it, feeling like they've gotten information that's actually personalized for them. And also companies reeling the benefits around less people having to do that, but more importantly, helping their customers in a quick manner.
Well, that sounds good to me. I'm more than happy to add frictionless to the jail this week. And we'll see later down the line if anyone wants to come on the show and advocate to break that one back out again. But for now, Bill, thank you so much again for joining us for the podcast today. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, that's all we have time for this week. Thanks, of course, to Bill for joining me. As for FinTech Futures, you can find us online at fintechfutures.com. And be sure to follow us on LinkedIn to keep up with the latest FinTech news. If you like this podcast and our other episodes, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, or your favorite podcasting service to get notified about future episodes. Thanks as well to Arama for editing this podcast. You can check them out at arama.tv. And as always, thank you very much for your support, and we'll see you soon for another episode of What the FinTech. But until then, goodbye.